What's up? Welcome back to my channel, or for the first time if you're new, I'm Sylvan, and today I'm going to be reacting to Lord of Mysteries Episode 1. I am actually recording this opening after I've reacted to and analyzed the entire episode, because I originally was planning on doing both the first and second episode, so in the analysis you might hear me referencing that I'm going to also react to the second episode of this video. That didn't happen. I took way too long in my note-taking and analysis portion of this video, so we'll get to that in time, but for now, this is just the first episode reaction, as you could probably tell from the title. To explain where I was when I went into this, I had basically no knowledge going in. I knew that it was supposed to be sort of a steampunk-ish Victorian era setting with some potential like magic system stuff. I did not know pretty much anything else. I did not know any of the other context of the series, but otherwise I was excited to get into this, and I'm even more excited to continue with it now, so feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, leave a comment on your thoughts, consider becoming a channel member if you want to support me just that little bit extra, and let's get into this. Okay, I guess a logo or something. Love the color on this. Is this also a logo? I guess it is, huh? Hopefully we don't get all these logos every episode, but whatever. If it does, oh well. No big deal. Would love to read that. Beyonders? Okay. Ascend to divinity. Alright. 22 pathways, weakest sequence 9. Okay, so 9 is the weakest. The lower the number, the stronger it is. Okay, godlike power at the lower levels. The path of the divine. Okay. Some immediate exposition about some kind of like power system or whatever. Ooh. Oh, I already love how this looks. Fifth Epoch, the Iron Age. Okay. Shingen City Doomsday. Whoa! What? The world? Okay. What the fuck is already happening? Ooh. I love the, like, filter that's on everything right now. Still alive? This is one hell of a cold open. What the fuck is going on? Okay. What the hell? Okay, we have an airplane. Ooh, chromatic aberration, world upside down. Did this guy fall out of that airplane? What is going on? Ooh? Oh my god! Okay. Ooh, 2 months prior. So what we just saw was 2 months ago, huh? Who is this guy? Oh, whoa. What the... Line. A ghost? Something like that? This isn't me. Transmigrated? What the hell? Interesting use of 3D. Captain, okay. Police force, maybe? Welch and Naya. Hawaii University. I'm trying to get as many names as I can. Suicide, okay. Black divination. Or Beyonder was sacrificed. Huh. Interesting. Klein Moretti. Some kind of healing factor. Huh. Ooh. Lots of information immediately. My goddess. Okay. The fourth epoch. Antigonus family. Okay. I feel like I should be taking notes. Ooh. The Tudor Empire. Huh. Focus on the gun. And then it flips to the page it was on. Hermes language. Okay. Everyone will die. Oh. Yeah, they mentioned something about a sibling. Gonna be hard to hide all the blood. And there's the gun. Melissa Moretti, sister of Klein. Okay. Casually hiding a gun. Fair. Good thing she just woke up and isn't being too suspicious. Oh. The soundtrack has been interesting so far. Okay. Yeah. Seems confused but not concerned. Disguised as suicide. Okay. Klein's memories. Okay. They seem awfully familiar with this concept of what has happened to them. Okay. Luck enhancement ritual. Is this an isekai? Is this just like a particularly intelligent guy who knows his shit about like that kind of stuff? Okay, huh. 8 pounds of fresh bread. Okay. Yeah, this is very sort of Victorian era style. Okay. Interesting reaction from him. Oh. Oh. Yeah. That actually is a good point. Yeah, the food quality isn't great here. God, this bread looks nice. I love the style of the environments. Oh? Interesting that he's maintained a lot of Klein's memories. Who? Following the rat? Huh. This is an interesting shot. God, these backgrounds look nice. Iron Cross Street, Tingen City, Lowen Kingdom. Okay. All words and names we've gone before now at this point. Yeah, this looks fucking beautiful. If not for the eerie crimson moon. Parallel Earth. Yeah, so this is essentially an isekai. I guess just different terminology because this is Chinese in origin, I think. Freeze? Ah. Huh. Ooh. Terra Divination and the Steam engine. Ooh. Oh, I love when stories do that kind of stuff with isekai. I'm gonna be calling it isekai. Oh, go into the gun quick. A clown? Oh, a circus. Huh. Oh? Someone watching him? Rather convenient that he has all the knowledge that he needs. Yeah, who's following him? He's not confronting them. There's that guy we saw before. Ooh, I like the shot of the eyes. We follow the rat again, but this time we're a cat following the rat. Ooh. Huh. How interesting to slip into a place like that. Regents. Okay. Oh. Noticing him made them walk away? Yeah, okay. Tarot cards. Bring that up a second time. Okay. Not the best business practice, but okay. Eh, well, to an extent. I'm not a businessman. Oh? Not used to someone knowing this much? Or I guess just, yeah. He already knows what to do. Yeah. Ooh, the intensity. Mr. Free. Okay, starting with the present. The Fool. In the present, they are the Fool. They're doing some good work with the 3D elements. Hmm. Yep. Rather predictive of this. Okay. Oh, and then he comes in. We only see the present. Oh, but he slipped out. Okay. Things are moving quickly. I sort of like it. Absolutely going to need to go back and figure some of this out, but I think I'm following so far. Oh, wait, is this already the end of the episode? Or is this the midpoint? The 7 Orthodox Gods of the North Continent. Okay, I'm going to need to go back and read that. Okay, I think that was the, like, midpoint. Celestial worthy of heaven and earth. Yeah, so trying to get home. Huh. Good thing he remembers all the steps. Huh. Ooh, I love that flair of that instrument. Something's happening. Yeah, he's definitely doing something, whether he realizes it or not. Okay, yeah, police. That definitely had importance, even if it didn't achieve what he wanted. Oh? What? What is... Whoa. Jesus, okay. What is happening to this man? Ooh. The use of black and white, the monochromatic. Yeah. Where is he now? Where are these red motes? Oh, there's a blue one. Maybe you shouldn't be touching those. I'm loving the color of the blue and red here. This is speaking exactly to my aesthetics. Oh? Ice? Who are these people? I'm assuming these are these represented by the blue and red here. He made contact with them and got a glimpse of them, maybe? I'm loving the color work here. Ooh. And now she's here as well? Ooh. I love that camera work, and now he is here. But they can only indistinctly see each other, okay. And then we have Klein. Ooh. He's a... Oh, I'm loving these shots. He doesn't know. I guess. He made contact with those motes. The master of this divine realm. Ooh. Is it manifesting a form now that he's thought of what it should have? Or is this just a coincidence? Is he truly the master of this realm? Or someone who has power over it? Yeah, it would seem like it. Third-party tool? Ooh, he made a throne. Interesting. He's really just moving through this casually. I like this guy's vibe already. Ooh. Okay, we've got his actual name now. Is he now a blend of the two? He has the memories of Klein, so... And memories play a big part in the person. Ooh, put it on the voice! The Fool! He inherits that title, representing his present. Okay. Oh, he's leaning into it. He's playing a part. Does he know that for certain? Hmm. Yeah. Okay, a dreamer. To become a Beyonder. Yeah. Are you gonna lie? Throwing out a wild guess. A bluff. He definitely seemed to have some magic to him. Okay. They fight against the dangers of the dark. Huh. So royalty and defenders against the darkness, like organizations built around that. Sailor and Spectator. Yeah, we've learned about that at the very beginning. He's already integrated himself into this world greatly. Oh? Yeah. I suppose. Is he just going to reenact the ritual then to try to achieve this again? He's already using the Fool. Oh, he's just unconscious? Justice. Okay. Audrey Hall Justice. The Hanged Man. Okay. The Tarot Club. Interesting. We're going to be gathering these people, I imagine. The Blasphemy Slate. The 22 Paths, yeah. Hmm. So a realm he holds control over, that he can draw people's consciousnesses into, across space. Ooh, but it shattered items of theirs. Interesting. And he passes out while he's there. The police are here. And he has a gun and a bloody notebook. He's good at playing a role. Ah, this guy. Leonard Mitchwell. Yeah, someone else was following him as well. Ottawa County Police. Ooh. Interesting sound work there. Dunn Smith. Okay. Ooh. Is that to show that he's a Beyonder, perhaps? Getting back to the start of that. Yeah, okay. He's already found it. It's easy. He didn't hide it very well. What's your answer? Hmm. Playing the fool. Ah, okay. It's his revolver. He's playing along with it. He's playing along a psychic test. Hmm. Interesting. Are dead? But who was that other guy who was coming after him? There was that one guy who, the moment he noticed the inspector, turned around. Huh. Hmm. Uh-oh. Is he gonna try to escape? That's not gonna look good. What's your plan here, my guy? There's some really interesting shots here I like quite a bit. Oh? Water being dumped? Time and space are frozen. What? Is this because of him or someone? It's a Beyonder, yeah. If this is the power of Beyonder, what sequence are they? Oh my god! Is this the power level we're dealing with in the series? Yeah, the buildings themselves are moving. Jesus. Yeah, it's this guy, I take it. Yeah, not happening. You're not getting away that easy. Oh, what? Wait, what? What is happening? Was that a dream, or is this a time loop? Or is this a dream? This guy again. Reintroduce. Nighthawk. Has to be. He had the little thing in his eye. In the dark of the night. So he's to be a Beyonder as well? Whoa! The Crimson Moon. Ooh. Oh, what? What? What is going on? She prefers corpses over men. Whoa. Whoa. What was all of that? We're in another weird location. Very surreal. His actual parents? Is this the psychic? Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. Huh. What? Huh. The notebook is gone? That's the question at all of this. Oh. Ooh, this off-kilter shot. Interesting. And then he manifests the gun. Okay. A manifestation of his Beyonder powers, I assume? Yet he shoots himself. Okay. What? Passed the test? Their souls? Ah. Okay. She's much more composed now. Okay. Is this going to be the core to our plot initially? Welcoming him into their organization? Yeah. A Nighthawk? A Beyonder, yeah. Okay. Interesting setup. Yeah, and that's where we were left. Okay. Ooh. The sound of notebook or, like, writing? Okay, looks like there might be some kind of end credits thing. I'm just gonna let this play out while I sort of give my initial thoughts. Huh. I am incredibly intrigued already. We've got a lot of good elements here. Ooh. Yeah, okay, the tree, okay. All the sequences, all the paths. Oh, is this supposed to be the opening or something? Interesting. Oh yeah, the between space. Oh, he's got the, okay, the clown? He's got the top hat now, alright. Interesting. So this is our organization? We become one of the Nighthawks, become a Beyonder? But then we also have the Tarot Club. Interesting. Everything rising out of the sand. Huh. But it all falls away into the sand of an hourglass. Okay. And then we have the tarot cards that representing the Tarot Club and the Fool, yeah. Huh. Okay, so unlike all of my previous anime reactions, I actually decided to go back and take some notes after I finished watching this episode. And I think I got a little carried away. I have about 7 pages of notes from the first episode alone. Oops! But so because of that, I've had some more time to think about the episode, think about what the content of it is, what my feelings on it are, and I'm gonna sort of explore that as sort of quickly as I can here before getting into the next episode. First off, for more just general opinion, I really like this opening episode. I can understand why people watching this first episode could be confused or feel like it's throwing too much info at you, but personally, I don't find this actually too confusing. It's really just there's a lot of unexplained stuff that presumably will be explained later, and then just a wall of information. There's a lot of names, terms, places, concepts that are just thrown at us immediately, and we're expected to basically be able to follow along, which, largely speaking, I was able to, I think. Just also, very often, I was, as you saw in the reaction, going, what is happening? But I don't find that as a negative thing. I don't find the question, what is happening, to be a bad thing. That is a legitimate just question that some of the fun of the series is going to be figuring out what is going on. The series is called Lord of Mysteries, so there's gonna be some mysteries for us to solve. And that is actually part of why I ended up going back and taking so many notes. I want to make sure I have terms, places, characters, concepts, dates, all of that locked in as best I can going forward. But to get into the actual meat of what is happening, we first off have some major exposition in this episode, obviously. Some major concepts that aren't fully explained, but we're given enough info to understand how they might work. One of those first concepts we're given is the concept of a Beyonder, a person or entity that has essentially magic powers. And the most powerful of the Beyonders are these figures that can rival gods in their powers. Something interesting that I noted in the initial exposition was the phrasing sort of implied that Beyonders and humans aren't one and the same, but that might just be an odd phrasing thing, but still something I noted. It's possible that not all Beyonders are humans, but humans can be Beyonders, or that when a human becomes a Beyonder, they have fundamentally become something other than human, or it might just be a translation error or just an odd phrasing. Either way, the actual function of how the Beyonder stuff works, supposedly it seems to be off of these potions that we get hinted towards a couple times. We initially are told that humans can drink potions to gain the powers of the Beyonders, and then later in the episode, we have Alger telling us that he has 2 potion formulas. So it seems like the conventional way that people become Beyonders is through these potions, whatever they may be. We also learn that there are these 22 paths of the divine, as they're called, that seem to essentially be the different tiers or variants or power levels of a Beyonder, with sequence 9 being the weakest, and the lower the number of sequence you get, the more powerful you become. It isn't explicitly made clear if someone who is a sequence 9 Beyonder can improve their power to become a sequence 8, 7, so on, but that hierarchy is established. One thing I sort of have a question of is if there's 22 pathways, why is the weakest sequence 9? Because even if you double the number from 9, 8, 7, 6, blah, 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 to 9, 8.5, 8, 7.5, so on, you still only have 18, so it can't be that simple. So I wonder if it's a thing of, like, you have sequences 9 through 1, or even 9 through 0, and then after that, you have another whole tier of things that are the even more powerful levels, or if the 22 pathways is less explicitly the ranking of power and more so just 22 different, like, aspects or variants of a Beyonder and there are the several sequences within those. Lots of ways it could be explained, just not sure yet. We haven't been told. But in the initial exposition, it is called a path of evolution, implying that there is a potential for growth along this path, going from sequence 9 to lower numbers and so on, or whatever. Interesting base function of a magic system. We'll see how it actually works later, but just the basic idea of it, I'm on board with. It's pretty straightforward and understandable, even if there's a lot of logistics we don't get yet. We also have the implication that if someone were to sacrifice a Beyonder in some kind of like human sacrifice ritual or something like that, it in some way could have some impact or function that potentially could draw dark forces into the world or whatever. We'll touch back on that in a bit, but we have that implication. We also haven't mentioned that Beyonders are rather rare in this world, to the point that most people on average would never meet one, but they are a known factor to exist. And then on top of that, we have sort of two obvious means to become a Beyonder told to us. One being joining one of these organizations related to the gods, or getting into contact with and forming connections with royal families or noble families that are over a millennium old, is what is said. So those two main avenues of either getting close to the nobility and royalty or joining one of these organizations. Those are the main ways to become Beyonders that we are told. But that's basically the core of what we learn about Beyonders in this episode. So expanding out from there, just to touch on some major concepts and things like that in this setting before we get to the more nitty-gritty of character. As I mentioned, joining the organizations related to certain gods can be a means of becoming a Beyonder, so let's touch on the gods. In the sort of like ad break mid-episode type thing in the middle, we had a text blurb describing the 7 orthodox gods of the northern continent. Those being the eternal blazing sun, the Lord of Storms, the god of wisdom and knowledge, the Evernight goddess, the Earth Mother, the god of combat, and the god of steam and machinery. We don't get actual names, just these titles. And we are told that these 7 orthodox gods are the ones recognized across the northern continent during the 5th epoch, and that their actual forms are not known or understood, and they are represented by symbols instead. This gives us a lot of answers about the mythology of the world, or at the very least the northern continent. Regardless of the truth behind these gods, the various countries of the northern continent do in fact worship these gods. We have signs of this. I'm guessing that the goddess that is mentioned in passing multiple times throughout the episode is probably the Evernight goddess, because that's the only one of the 7 gods described as a goddess specifically. It could also be the Earth Mother, because that's another feminine god that is in here, but I'm more inclined to think that the goddess referenced is the one referred to as a goddess. And the fact that these are the 7 gods is fairly interesting to me, because we have some fairly conventional things, the kind of stuff that is personified as gods in a lot of religions. The sun, storms, the earth, night, and then we have some other more distinct things that are less natural world, but also very common godlike figures, being the god of wisdom and knowledge and the god of combat. Really, the one that stands out to me is the god of steam and machinery. That is a very distinctive one. A lot of fantasy settings and stuff will have some kind of god of technology or something like that, but there's a few things that make me curious about that god, and I'm going to touch on that in a moment after bringing up a few other things. Mainly being that during the episode, we at multiple points have reference to an old emperor from about 100 years ago, named Rosel Gustav, who supposedly was the Intis Emperor, invented a ton of things, including the steam engine, modern tarot divination, seems to have written a lot of poetry, and a lot of things sort of point to him maybe being a transmigrator, but I'm sort of getting ahead of myself there. The reason I bring him up now is the fact that he invented the steam engine, and he was around about 100 years ago. The reason I mention this is because, related to the gods, usually in fantasy settings, gods are actual existent entities that are known in some capacity, and their powers are drawn on or defined in some way that is a fact of reality. Admittedly, we are not in a traditional fantasy setting. We are in a more steampunk Victorian era setting that just also seems to have gods and sort of eldritch beings. But the reason I bring up Rosel in this is because where the 6 other gods we have been given titles of and stuff are the kind of thing that would have existed for eternity, basically, if they are real gods, and if they aren't real entities but invented religious figures, could have been created by humanity ages past. A god of steam and machinery is a very modern concept, especially for this setting. If it was just technology, or even just machinery, it would be one thing, but steam and machinery, that implies a connection to the steam engine and that kind of technology. Which leads me to the thought, are these gods created entities conceived of by the people of this world like actual religions? Not to say that real world religions might not be correct, I'm agnostic personally, but within the context of there isn't explicitly gods coming down into the world and revealing themselves to people constantly in more traditional fantasy ways? Is it like that, and therefore the god of steam and machinery is the kind of figure who would have been created and added into this set of orthodox gods after the creation of such devices like the steam engine? Or is this alternatively that these gods are fundamental beings that do exist, and it's just that the god of steam and machinery came into being thanks to the creation of this new technology, or was originally some other kind of god that then was reinterpreted or altered once this discovery was made? There's a lot of possibilities behind what exactly the gods could be, how real they are, how believed they are, how created they are. I don't know if that's something the story is going to touch on much, but it's just interesting to me conceptually, and I wanted to comment on it. But moving on to other major things, I mentioned something about the fifth epoch before. That seems like it is something that is a major teller of time, sort of like an era. This is implied by the word epoch in of itself. So to know we are in the fifth epoch is important. We don't know how long this epoch has lasted, but if I were to make a guess, I could very much see the appearance and rise of Roselle as an inventor and ruler. Probably somewhere in his lifetime was the shifting of the epochs from the fourth to the fifth, meaning it would be placed about 100 years ago. It's possible that's not the case, but that seems like a very defining and important moment for, at the very least, this kingdom. So I'm going to sort of use that as my frame of reference until proven otherwise. We don't really get much information on the first through fourth epochs, but we do have a reference to the fourth one occasionally. And then from there, I think I'll sort of narrow down into the actual place that everything is happening, and then I'll get to the characters. So as I was mentioning before, we are focused on the northern continent in the Lowen Kingdom. More specifically, everything that we've seen so far, other than one exception, seems to be in the Awa County, in the city of Tingen. That is where all of the city scenes are, which is just about the entire episode, other than the sort of extant bits with our main character, and also the bits with Algar. So presumably Tingen will be the main setting of the majority, if not the entirety of this series. We will potentially learn quite a bit about this place in general. We don't know too much yet, but we know it is in a specific county, in a specific kingdom, that seems to have royalty and nobles and stuff, but it also has an actual police force, referred to as the Awa County Police. So though it seems like it is a fairly modernized society, given that it has conventionally modern police with inspectors and captains and that kind of thing, police as we know them are actually a fairly modern concept. I forget exactly when it sort of came into being as we know it, but it is a decently modern concept. So it is potentially possible that this is also something that Roselle brought from his knowledge of our world or something like that. But really my point here is they have some more modern concepts and structures in this kingdom, but it is still a kingdom with nobility and royalty. It is still presumably some kind of monarchy or oligarchy or something like that, but we don't truly get a lot of those answers. We just have a lot of implied stuff. From there, though, I think realistically we'll probably be better off taking things roughly chronologically, episode-wise, not actual timeline-wise, because I think that will best help sort of understand what actually is going on. First up, after the initial exposition, we are dropped in media res into a scene on September 9th in Tingen City on supposedly Doomsday. We watch as a woman seems to start giving birth and then transform / get possessed by something that is very sort of eldritch in nature. It very much seems like she becomes an eldritch horror of some kind. Perhaps the cause and origin of this Doomsday is whatever entity is flowing through her, becoming her, whatever is going on. But it's here that we see our main character, who for the majority of this I will be referring to as Klein, because that's what he's referred to as for most of this episode. But he's a whole thing, we'll get to that in a bit. We see Klein fighting this monster after it manifests, and he's using tarot cards. So clearly that tarot card element is something retained into the future at this point, because that's a thing. This is not modern day. This, as it states, is a flash forward, essentially, showing us a doomsday that we'll have to either prevent or be prepared for, or even just a ironic tragedy type of scenario for a more narrative sense, where we know where this is leading, even if we don't know what happens after, and so we're now just watching how it got there. But it's here that we see seemingly Klein be killed, or injured severely at the very least, as he's attacked by this creature, and then just a massive blast goes off, seemingly decimating the church that they were in and everything around it. And this is paired with narration that is talking about a supreme being, something that the narrator seemingly is praying to and in some way calling upon its power. Perhaps it's a god of some kind, but it also seems like it's a dark god. Potentially it is this eldritch being that is contorting and transforming this woman, as the narrator also describes them as a figure that grants blessings through depravity, filth, and darkness. I would imagine that this supreme being very well might be our sort of more cosmic level antagonist figure, something that we aren't on a ground level fighting and talking and arguing with or anything like that, but more the existential threat that we are fighting against. We learn later in the episode that the various organizations of the gods supposedly fight against dangers in the dark, these dark forces that try to enforce themselves on reality. Very likely, this supreme being or whatever is sort of the mind or consciousness or entity behind most of that darkness, or at least one of them. Very much I'm getting the vibe here that the setting has these conventional gods, and then it has sort of this dark god or gods that are sort of this great old one, eldritch horror kind of creatures, and just sort of tying pieces together where I see potential connections. We also get a name drop with basically no context relatively early on when reading through Klein's notebook of someone called the Black Emperor. We have no context to who the Black Emperor is. It very well might be disconnected from this, but I would not be surprised if the Supreme Being and the Black Emperor are either one and the same, or at the very least connected. Perhaps the Black Emperor was an emperor of a former kingdom or empire that was transformed or influenced or corrupted by the Supreme Being. Entirely possible. If I want to keep just making these connections, perhaps the Black Emperor was the emperor of the Tudor Empire. We hear about that very briefly in the notebook as well. But ultimately, these are very fleeting mentions of stuff that we really don't get much on, but I want to throw these names and places out so that they're sort of rolling in our heads. But after seeing that and having that bit of narration, we jump back roughly 2 months to June 28th, the day that essentially the rest of the episode takes place on. But it's at this point where I think I want to touch on our main character more explicitly. Klein Moretti, or more aptly initially here, Zhou Mingrui. Presumably my pronunciation is entirely off there. Luckily I'm going to be using the other name for the most part. Evidently, this story, though I didn't realize it initially, is an isekai, or a transmigrator story? I'm not familiar with the term transmigrator or transmigrated. I understand language enough to know what the gimmick of that is supposed to be. It's essentially the same idea, though it might have some other implied things. I wouldn't be surprised if this is sort of like the Chinese equivalent of an isekai story. Feel free to let me know in the comments if that is a thing, or if this is sort of just a weird thing on its own. But our pretty much first introduction to this character is with some interesting imagery. We see a plane flying and presumably Zhou falling from the sky. It sort of implies that they fell out of the plane, but then the world inverts, they get torn apart and pulled back together and then wake up as Klein. It's entirely possible that all of that was metaphorical or a more dream state thing. It's not entirely clear what's going on, but it doesn't feel completely real. What we do know for a fact that we learned relatively quickly is that Zhou was down on his luck, seemingly living with his parents or something like that, but having bad luck at work, so he did a luck enhancement ritual. And though he doesn't know for certain, he suspects that that's what caused him to transmigrate. What we can sort of get from this is, first off, he's familiar with the concept of what's going on. He understands what transmigration is in some way, even if he just understands the narrative trope of it, if it is in fact a narrative trope thing. But something interesting to take count of is he sort of receives and takes in several of Klein's memories. It seems like rather than being a person sent to this world like a typical isekai story, he is transported mentally, consciousness-wise, into the body of someone who already existed. Perhaps that's normal for transmigration stories, I don't know. But what it results in, very interestingly, is after this sort of initial moment as his body is healing, his head is healing the bullet wound through his brain, we see him confused, not sure what's going on, seeing visions of Klein despite being in Klein's body, realizing that he isn't the person he's seeing the reflection of. And then he seems to sort of come into understanding, oh, wait a minute, I'm in the body of Klein, I know who he is, I have his memories, that kind of thing, with notable exceptions of recent events. But it leads to an interesting thing character-wise that is briefly acknowledged later in the episode, which is this truly still Zhou, or is this some blend of Zhou and Klein? I would be inclined to say it is a blend, because memories are so much of what makes up a person and their built-up experience and belief, that to inherit the majority of someone's memory is fundamentally to make yourself more like that person. Obviously, if you were literally reliving someone's life, you wouldn't necessarily take the same lesson from all of their memories or something. But fundamentally, in inheriting these memories, it feels like Zhou is becoming more than just Zhou. But he isn't just becoming Klein either. He's someone between, which I would very much enjoy if we dive into that more, because I absolutely love questions of identity and personhood and stuff like that, so I would love to explore it narratively. Another interesting detail, he literally heals from a bullet wound to the head. He suspects that it's probably related to the transmigration. I feel like that's fair to say. Until we get further proof, I am not going to suspect he has healing powers. That probably is just related to that, but it's possible he does, who knows. Beyond that though, personality-wise, he seems to be a fairly kind person. Even if it's just him putting up a mask, he seems to be able to interact with people well, smile, be kind, compliment others, and even if at the end of the day he tries to look out for himself a little bit more than anything, he does seem to have concern for others. The thing that comes to mind for me is how early on in the episode, once Klein's sister leaves and says to like wait for her so that she can make him dinner or whatever, he has this reaction of some kind where he's either like surprised or impressed or realizes that depending on what happens next, he might be leaving this girl without a brother, maybe? I don't know. There's a lot of ways to interpret his reaction to her kindness, but what we do know is immediately after that, he thinks to himself, essentially, I'm sorry, but I don't know if your brother is going to be here once I leave. So that shows at least a level of empathy, a level of care, not necessarily beyond a normal person's level of empathy, but there is a level of emotional intelligence there. The other notable characteristic I get from him is he's good at bluffing. He is fairly talented at improving on the spot, picking up on subtle clues to be able to keep up a facade. The two main places we see this are in the divine realm, as it's called by Audrey, as well as in his sort of impromptu interrogation from the police. In the case of being in the divine realm, first off, he doesn't really know what to call himself, so he says, "Call me the fool," drawing on something that sort of represents him right now, that we'll get to later. He then continues to sort of give this aesthetic and vibe of being this knowledgeable, powerful, impressive person who knows what he's doing and knows what's going on. When Audrey asks, "How do I become a Beyonder?" he does not say, "I don't know," and he does not show that he does not know. He instead notices that Alger is clearly more knowledgeable, clearly more sort of capable, and says, he can answer your question, which on one level is a wild guess. It's a bluff. He is not sure if that guy knows, but he's lucky he does. He was betting on that guy knowing. And lucky for him, Alger did know. And we even have internal monologue a little later that when he's trying to decide if he should let them meet again, he thinks to himself, I potentially could be exposed if I keep doing this, but the values outweigh the problems. And then in the other case with the interrogation, though on a surface level he is very honest with them, he does not remember a lot of key recent moments, he isn't sure what's going on, he cooperates until he runs off later, but he is always hiding the fact that he is not actually Klein. He is someone in the body of Klein, and he is actively secretive about that fact, to the point of fleeing the police in a moment after. So he, in a lot of ways, at least from a bluffing deception standpoint, knows how to play his cards pretty well. Perhaps out of experience, or maybe he's just lucky. We'll have to see. A lot of this first episode was really more scene establishment than anything, but these are sort of the initial things I can get off of the character. But then, while talking about the protagonist, I'd also like to touch on what we learn about Klein as a person, because Klein, the original person, Klein Moretti, we have some key details. Both his parents are dead, lives with his siblings, we meet the sister, but we only ever see in a picture once a brother who gives the vibes of an older brother to me. I'll be curious to see when we meet them. He was a history graduate of Khoi University, which seems to just be a school in the kingdom or whatever. He was classmates with Welch and Naya, being the two current sort of victims, as I'll call them, and he's proficient in both Ancient Phasak and Hermes, two languages, it would seem. We can also intuit that Klein and his siblings aren't necessarily the most well off. Who knows what the other brother is doing? And the sister is currently a student. We don't know if she's also working. Either way, they can only afford a single apartment for the three of them with one bathroom. Generally speaking, it seems like Klein was a fairly honest guy, a kind person, got along with the people around him, well educated. We don't really know what the average level of education is in this world or in this city or kingdom, but at the very least, he was well educated, regardless of how abnormal that is. But one thing we can potentially gather of what he's been working on is that nearly for a month now, as of the time that the story picks up, he had been working with his classmates, Welch and presumably Naya. We know for a fact he was working with Welch, but we don't have Naya actually mentioned much. We just know that she clearly had the same end result as Welch and Klein, but they were working together to decipher an ancient notebook that Welch had discovered. But to be more specific about the details of what actually happened, we know that on May 29th was when Welch came to Klein to tell him about the ancient notebook, and it wasn't until June 20th that they finally were able to decipher the first page. So presumably they were for most of June trying to decipher it and finally finished deciphering the first page after roughly a month. It's on this initial page that they were able to discover that the notebook was from the 4th epoch, so from at least 100 years ago, based on my guesstimation, and also that the author was from the Antigonus family. We don't actually get any further info on the Antigonus family, but realistically it's safe to say that they are either a family from the 4th epoch that isn't around anymore, or a family that has been around since the 4th epoch, if not older. In fact, it's actually entirely likely that they are even older than the 4th epoch, but at the very least we know this specific journal was written in the 4th epoch, so at the very least that's how old the family is. But then, as they continue to decipher it, we have a lot of these weird name drops, like the Tudor Empire, the Black Emperor, that kind of thing. And then it seems like on the 26th, Klein, and presumably Welch and maybe even Naya, seem to come to some strange realization or revelation. They seem to have learned something that they are questioning. I forget the exact line, but it's something along the lines of, how can all of this possibly be true, or something like that. I don't know, I might need to find the line in case it's important. But then, after that, there is no entry on the 27th, and then on the 28th is the day that Zhou becomes Klein, after Klein evidently has attempted suicide. To everyone else, it will seem like a failed attempt, but based on what we saw, it seems like it was very much successful, and the only reason he's able to walk around is because now it's Zhou in there. We also know that Welch and Naya had a similar result of their end. Based on just the context clues of this, it seems like all three of these people learned something dark and impossible that resulted in them killing themselves for one reason or another. Whether it was just something so horrible they learned that they couldn't live with themselves knowing it, or if it was truly like some forbidden knowledge that by learning it they were compelled to end their own lives. I suppose we'll find out. All we know is that before dying, Klein wrote on a random page in his notebook, "Everyone will die, including me." Perhaps what they discovered in this notebook was some apocalyptic prophecy related to this doomsday on September 9th, or maybe it is just that forbidden knowledge type idea. Either way, that is sort of the core background of the last few days, and then we get into the actual events of the episode. What is interesting to consider, though, as we move into the rest of the episode's content, is the context of Welch, Nya, and Klein's deaths. We know that Klein visited Welch's house on the 27th, and then on the 27th, Welch, Nya, and Klein all tried to kill themselves. Welch and Nya did so at Welch's home, found dead next to each other, having killed themselves in uniquely different ways. But Klein went home before doing it. Evidently, he didn't just go home and then decide to kill himself. He took a gun from Welch's home, left with it, arrived home, and then tried to kill himself, potentially after writing, "Everyone will die, including me." So of course, the main question is, why did Klein wait? What was different about his circumstance? There is no obvious answer yet, it's hard to say, but that is a difference that presumably we will discover the reason behind at some point here. The other big question mark is everything is pointing to Klein having shot himself in the head with a revolver. That is not something that is done quietly, which leads to a question that is actually brought up in episode. If he is living with a brother and a sister, one that seemingly sleeps in a bunk bed with him, and the other lives in just one room over, how did they not hear the gunshot? How did they not realize Klein had shot himself? Once again, this is just a question that is brought up with no answer, but it is an important one. It leads to the question, maybe something else happened. Maybe it was just made to look like he shot himself, and something else made that wound in his head, or some other force hid the sound and everything of the event from his siblings. It's not entirely clear. There's only so many ways I can think of where they wouldn't have noticed, but somehow they didn't. But it's from here that we know that essentially the MacGuffin of this initial plotline, if not the entire series, is going to be this ancient notebook from the Antagonist family. I believe they call it the Antagonist notebook later. And likely a good part of the plot will be trying to find it, because evidently it has gone missing since last night. We have this notebook that has ancient, impossible, potentially forbidden knowledge that in some way has led either directly or indirectly to 3 people killing themselves that is missing. It's on the loose somewhere, nobody knows. The police are trying to find it, they aren't sure. But speaking of the police, we do also loosely follow the police's investigation of this. Specifically, we follow Dunsmith and Leonard Mitchwell's investigation. Leonard seems to be an inspector, while Dunn seems to be a captain. The first time we see them is at the crime scene of Welch and Nya's death. It's here that some theories are thrown out, one being the idea that Beyonder was sacrificed that I mentioned before, while the other one being that perhaps black divination was done here. We don't know what black divination is, we just know that is one possibility for why evil power seems to have descended on this location, on Welch's home, where he and Nya killed themselves. Perhaps black divination is something related to the notebook, perhaps the notebook goes into concepts of black divination, and perhaps it has to do with why Welch and Nya ended up getting themselves killed. Either way, just another term that we learned. Beyond that though, just to sort of go a lot quicker through this, first off, just names wise, we know that Welch's last name is McGovern. We learned that whatever happened to Welch and Nya, none of their souls can be found. There are no traces left behind of their souls, is the way it's described. We meet Melissa Moretti, the younger sister of Klein, as I mentioned before. She seems like she's a fairly kind girl, very much gives the vibe of the genius younger sister who has to always take care of her older brother who doesn't understand technology as well as she does. Based on just their little interaction, when Klein is hiding the fact that he just put away the gun by saying that he thinks the watch is broken, and she just seemingly like winds it up and then hands it over, and he gets the vibe that it's the kind of action of someone taking care of an idiot brother. And this lines up with the fact that we learn that supposedly she is a student at the Tingen Technical School, so she's going to a technical school where Klein went to a separate school for history. Both clearly intelligent, well-educated people, just one is in more technical applied forms and the other is in a more academic form. We also have just a clown that shows up and tries to get Klein to come to a circus performance later that night at 7, which normally I wouldn't note at all, but they were in the OP or whatever the thing at the very end was, which confuses me. So I thought I'd mention them. We get basically nothing related to them, but you know. And then we also have a very brief moment where we see someone named Regents, or called Regents or whatever, that's what the little title card next to them says, who seems to be the person who was following Klein partway in the episode when he was just going out getting bread, that kind of thing, who was continuing to tail Klein and try to follow him for some reason we don't learn, until, interestingly enough, they notice Leonard, who had taken notice of this going on and seems to in some way be protecting Klein, probably because Klein is involved with his current investigation, so he can't let a living witness get attacked or captured or whatever Regents was going to do to him. But it's an interesting interaction because Regents notices Leonard, then walks away. Jumping forward a little bit, though, to talk about Leonard and Dunn we get a proper introduction to later when they interrogate Klein. We know they're police. They seem fairly agreeable and fairly cooperative. It's not like they were doing a proper interrogation. It was more them just asking questions. But I'm very much curious about Leonard, as we get more of Leonard than we do Dunn until like the very end. But we get no signs if Leonard is a Beyonder, where with Dunn, we get explicit confirmation they are a Beyonder, essentially. Which ties back to a thing about the Beyonders I should mention. It seems like Beyonders are definable or identifiable by this sort of glow or haze that can be seen in their eye occasionally. We see this in Dunn's eye once or twice. We see this, interestingly enough, in Klein's eye, I believe, when we're in the Divine Realm. And I think we see it in Alger's eye as well. And maybe Audrey? I forget. Either way, it seems to signify either someone being a Beyonder or having the potential to be a Beyonder. But I'm very much curious about Leonard, because though Dunn, we get the fact that he's a Beyonder, we learn that he is a Nighthawk, which seems to be the organization representing the Evernight goddess. We don't get any of that confirmation or explanation for Leonard. So it's possible Leonard is just a police inspector, but isn't part of the Nighthawks and isn't a Beyonder. But it's also possible he is, and we just haven't been shown that yet. Meanwhile, Dunn is fairly interesting. I can't quite make out if his powers are supposed to be dream powers or space-time manipulation powers. I'm leaning towards them being dream powers, but it's sort of hard to say because things get very sort of esoteric at the end of the episode. I imagine we'll get a bit more explanation of them in a later episode, potentially next episode, but it's just sort of interesting to see what the powers of Beyonders look like. And speaking of which, we also get introduced to someone else who I imagine is a Beyonder, being Dali Simone, is how I'm guessing to pronounce the name. We know that she is also a Nighthawk. She clearly is directly working with Dunn. We don't know if she is with the police, or if it's a case where Dunn is a police captain and a member of the Nighthawk, and those are mutually exclusive, he just happens to overlap, or if the Nighthawks are within the police. Either way, though, it seems like she has more sort of psychic mental powers, seemingly being able to dive into the minds of people and sift around in there to try to find information. I'm also guessing that perhaps she can, to an extent, do that with dead bodies, given the fact that we have her mentioning not finding any trace of Welch and Naya's souls, as well as the line from Dunn saying that she is more used to or prefers corpses to men. So perhaps she can dive into the memories or minds of people alive or recently dead. Either way, she isn't able to learn anything new, because it seems like Klein's memories of his time as Zhou were clouded over, and his memories of the 27th were just gone. Beyond that, though, the two main other characters we meet that inevitably will be very important are Audrey Hall and Alger Wilson. We meet these two in the Divine Realm. I'm going to be calling it the Divine Realm because I don't know what else to call it. These two form the other two founding members of the Tarot Club. And they're very interesting. They are some of the more intriguing characters to me because we simultaneously know a lot and very little about them. Though we don't explicitly know that Elgar is a Beyonder, we know that he understands how to become one and has the means to do so it is probably safe to say that he probably is one. Meanwhile, Audrey is not a Beyonder but wants to become one and doesn't know how. We know that Audrey is a member of the Hall noble family, and that is a noble family in the Lowen Kingdom, and she very much gives the vibe that she is sort of a free spirit, a kind, innocent young girl who dreams of greatness, of grandeur, and one means of doing that is becoming a Beyonder. Meanwhile, Elgar is a much more reserved person, much more calculating, much more serious. When he gets pulled into the Divine Realm, he was on a boat somewhere in or near the Sonia Sea, which, though we have no idea where that is, we know it is far from the Lowen Kingdom. But the only really defined and known factors about him that we learn is that, first off, his powers pale in comparison to Klein's as the Fool, but he has the formulas to 2 sets of Sequence 9 potions, which evidently is the means to become the weakest kind of Beyonder. Those 2 being Sailor and Spectator. Given that we see him on a boat, I would not be surprised if he used Sailor for himself, though he still has the formula, though that's just a wild guess. We don't even learn what the powers of it are. But we do learn that Spectator gives the powers of acute observation and the ability to judge actors, quote-unquote, in the secular world, is what it's described as. And Audrey becomes very interested in that. She describes it as having fallen in love with being the Spectator. It's interesting. But evidently, in this Divine Realm, when all of this is happening, our boy the Fool is all in his head for a variety of reasons, while a deal is made between Audrey and Elgar that we don't hear the full details of. We just know that she has an interest in becoming the Spectator, and that Elgar has the means to do that. Presumably, their agreement is something along the lines of meeting up so Elgar can give the formula or the potion made from the formula to Audrey, the means of which we don't know. We don't know how far apart they are, how long the timeline of this would have to be, but some kind of deal is struck, and Audrey asks if they can continue to meet in this Divine Realm. And though he has concerns, the Fool agrees to let this happen because he believes the more he goes into this space, the more he might be able to understand of how to return home. That is the main current goal of our protagonist. Don't get killed or arrested, get home. And so we effectively then, because of that, have 2 layered plot lines. The more ground level plot line is the stuff with the notebook, with Welch and Naya's death, and all of that, where the deeper plot line and motivation is with the Tarot Club and delving into this divine space to try to find a way to get home. Those are the 2 plots and motivations. Because if he can learn what happened to Welch and Naya, he can potentially make sure he himself is safe and won't be getting killed, and potentially stop whatever dark force is at work, while the other is the longer term, more grandiose, trying to get home via the means of meeting once a week on Mondays at 3 p.m. with Audrey and Elgar in this space, which I'm curious to see how that is done, because summoning them and entering that space was purely accidental on his part. He was not intending to do that. He was trying to go home. Now, of course, we have a pretty strong idea of how he got in there, and he does too, being reenacting the luck ritual. We get the details of that. I won't go through it all right now, but we have the details of that. But the bigger question is, will he be able to draw back those 2 again specifically? Because he seemingly purely on accident bumped into those red and blue motes, and that's what summoned them. We'll see, though. Another thing that I feel is absolutely worth mentioning, though I don't necessarily know how much it will be relevant going forward, is the tarot reading that Klein gets in this episode. So obviously he steps into the tent originally just to get away from the person who is following him, but then he ends up sitting down for a tarot reading because it's free. He knows what the deal is there. He decides to go through with it. Interestingly enough, just on the surface, not even getting into the tarot reading itself, we have some interesting details of the fact that we effectively get 2 characters here. One is the person who gives the tarot reading, who turns out to actually just be an animal trainer pretending to be a fortune teller. Seemingly they're interested in the tarot and fortune telling and that kind of thing and want to try it out, but evidently the actual fortune teller won't let them, as we see the fortune teller before the tarot reading can be finished, come in and say, what are you doing? Are you pretending to be me again? So it's entirely possible, based on just like how involved the designs of those characters are, that we might see them again. It might tie into the stuff with the clown and the circus performance. But even beyond that, even if we don't see those two characters ever again, and that's just some fun in the moment characterization, I do very much think that it is worth looking at what the tarot reading gave us. We did not see what the past or the future held, but we did hear of the present, and it had some impact on Klein. Specifically, he drew the Fool card, which, though I'm not the most knowledgeable about actual tarot cards and readings, they did give us some information, and I have a little bit of knowledge. Most notably for this, the Fool is meant to represent, in this case, fresh beginnings and possibilities, and just sort of like that general freedom of that kind of thing. It's not necessarily saying that the person is foolish or doing something foolish, as much as it is that freedom, that fresh start, that freedom of choice, that kind of thing, which absolutely is representative of Klein in this moment. He is literally a new, different person than who he was. If we're looking at it from this being Klein, Klein has essentially been turned into a new person. And if we look at it from the Zhou perspective, Zhou is literally in a new world with a new start. Everything is entirely new to him. So very much whether there is actual mystical power behind this reading that lines up with that, or if it's just a coincidence, very much the Fool fits for his present. And evidently this resonates with him, because it is what he ends up using as his name among the Tarot Club. And it's what inspires the Tarot Club's names and codenames. Within the Divine Realm, he is now known as the Fool. He has embodied that identity. No matter how consciously or intentionally he has taken in this position as a new beginning, a fresh start, new possibilities, whether that be possibilities for him or for the members of the Tarot Club who now are in contact with, in their perspective, this incredibly powerful figure. And clearly the tarot is going to be something that is deeply relevant to the story going forward, even if it's just on an aesthetic level, because the Tarot Club is named after it. All of the members of the club are naming themselves after cards, and in the Doomsday glimpse we get, we see him wielding and throwing as seemingly weapons tarot cards. So regardless of if it is on purely an aesthetic level, or there will be an actual mystical, magical influence of the tarot here, it is relevant. We have Audrey and Alger naming themselves after cards for their code names, being the Justice and the Hanged Man, respectively. Given all of the other chairs at the table in the Divine Realm, and the fact that there are plenty of other tarot cards, I imagine that the Tarot Club is going to continue to grow, find new members, and eventually become this much larger organization with someone representing each of the cards. In this context, it is also very fitting for Klein to take on the Fool as his identity, because it is, in tarot, I believe, supposed to be sort of the unique, sort of separate, sort of special card. Sort of in its own way separate and unique from the other 21 major arcana. It also isn't lost on me that the 22 paths we have in the Path of the Divine directly lines up with the 22 major arcana. So with that in mind, I would not be surprised if the 22 paths are not tied to any specific power level, like each path is not a power level like sequences, but rather each of the paths is just that, a path with distinct characteristics that align with one of the tarot cards, and then just the sequences within that are their own thing. But I suppose we'll have to see. This is all, at the end of the day, just sort of theorizing and acknowledging a lot of these disparate details. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of questions, a lot of major lore things that I could keep trying to go into, but at this point, I think I've yapped enough. I have all of this information for myself, but with that, I think I will leave things here. Feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, leave a comment on your thoughts, and very special thanks to all of my channel members, being Desaize and Pokelove101 at the normal tier, and Kondo Nano at the cool person tier. Really appreciate your support, as always, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye-bye!